Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. And if you enjoy this fanfic, what if Naruto was Kaguya's third son? Part 2. Then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Again, Naruto. Naruto nodded and began running around the training course as fast as he could. Nearby in the training field, the children of the Cage were practicing. Tamari was working on low-level wind jutsu with her new fan, Kankuro was practicing with his puppets, and Gaara was figuring out how to make sand armor a workable concept. Baki stood watching over them all, and Naruto was sprinting around the outskirts of the training field. All of them had switched into training clothes, and they'd been training for several hours. They were all determined to get stronger, and Baki was struggling to come up with lessons fast enough. Baki had been uneasy about training them all when Tamari had first requested it to her father. Baki had been in the office at the time, and he knew he would get ignored this job. Training the children of the Cage was a great honor, but it also meant he had to be wary of dying. 2 out of the 4 children could kill him if they really wanted to, both had killed hundreds of civilians and shinobi. The Cage had agreed to the request, predictably ignoring him as their teacher until they entered the academy. That was 6 months ago and all 4 of them had since grown much stronger. Baki had taught them how to channel chakra to their ears, eyes, and muscles to improve them. That had been when Naruto activated his dojutsu, which was, in fact, the Byakugan. The Cage had been ecstatic when he read Baki's report on their training. Naruto was definitely a significant aid to the village's military. Naruto's Byakugan didn't pulse out the veins around his eye like the Hyuga's clan Byakugan, surprisingly. The Cage had made the fact that Naruto's eyes were the Byakugan and SCL secret in the village. Only a few people knew this because the Cage didn't want spies from Konoha, or worse. Naruto, enough. Take a breather and then you will spar with Kankuro, then Tamari with Gaara, Baki ordered, getting acknowledgements from his students. Hi, Baki-sensei, Naruto replied, his voice flat and monotone. Baki kept his composure, used to Naruto's dislike of him. He didn't understand why Naruto seemed to dislike him, but it didn't worry him. Naruto followed orders without objection in regards to training, and nothing more was required of him for now. Naruto moved to a tree and sat down, the shade around him expanding as the tree literally bent over him. Naruto's control over all plant life still amazed Baki. The plants themselves seemed to want to protect him and would defend him from harm without him even being aware there was a danger. It was very similar to Gaara's automatic sand defense. Naruto leaned back against the tree trunk, staring into the crisp, clear blue sky, no clouds at all visible. He closed his eyes and let his dojutsu rest. He practically always had it on because it didn't strain him, and being able to see everywhere was very useful. The beauty of it was that no one could tell that he'd activated it unless they looked closely and knew what to look for. Naruto let a faint smile come to his lips. He somehow knew that there was a specific reason for this. His sensei had given him what scrolls Suna had on the Hyuga clan, in which one stated that most beginner Byakugan users had to practice to extend their range past 100 meters. He'd found that his first day using it he could almost see all of Suna, with training he could see the gate guards. I can feel it, Naruto thought. Since the night he lost his parents, he could sense this. Being out in the far distance. Over time it kept getting closer to him, and he felt more at peace and calm as it got closer. Naruto awaited its arrival with open arms, knowing it would answer all his questions. Taking a deep breath he relaxed further against the tree, letting his aching muscles calm down. Naruto let down his guard, something that Baki-sensei had drilled into them never to do. But my guard is never down. Even if I'm asleep the plants protect me, he mused. I wonder if I can get the plants to not defend me without having to constantly order them not to. I can only get so strong if they are always defending me, Naruto thought after a few moments. He loved the plants dearly, but it would be hard to grow if they would always save him from getting punched even though he had messed up. Naruto, come to the center for your spar, Baki called. Naruto opened his eyes, his dojutsu activating in a pulse of chakra. His vision became shades of gray, expanding and enabling him to see everything around him. His vision darted over to Kankuro as he stood up, rotating his view around the boy, looking for anything unusual he would need to know in the fight. He kept his face blank as he noticed that the Kankuro standing in front of him was a puppet, Kankuro hiding inside the bandages on the puppet's back. It would seem Kankuro has learned a new technique, Naruto thought as he stopped in the starting spot and waited for the spar to begin. At the edge of the sparring area sat Gaara and his sister on a bench of sand. Hajime. Both Naruto and Kankuro didn't move, Naruto seemingly staring at nothing while in truth he was analyzing Kankuro from all angles and even from within the puppet, seeking to find all the new hidden traps. Kankuro meanwhile was preparing to attack. He wasn't good at this technique yet, and most likely he would need to separate from his puppet as soon as the fight got going. It was, after all, very hard to see what was happening when inside a cocoon of bandages. Naruto did something that confused his opponent and the onlookers. Bored from waiting for Kankuro to attack, he sat down cross-legged, his hands in his lap. The next moment he closed his eyes, looking like he was meditating. Kankuro scowled. Moving his puppet forward, he threw kunai at Naruto. Naruto visibly concentrated, his face scrunching up, but he didn't move. Temari and Baki became concerned that the kunai would hit the pale white-haired boy. The kunai flew closer, and the plants did not appear as they usually did. Naruto relaxed, his eyes still closed. He pushed himself off the ground onto one hand, dodging every kunai, one just barely missing his arm he was using to support himself. I forgot that he can see everything. He could see that coming even with his eyes closed. Kankuro thought in annoyance. Dodge this then. Kankuro gave up on tricking Naruto with his puppets, knowing he had figured it out already. Jumping off his puppet's back, he manipulated it into firing hundreds of Senbon. They weren't all entirely accurate, but most would hit Naruto. He was still learning this after all. Naruto's eyes were still closed as he watched the incoming attack, deciding that practicing more skills would be beneficial to his development. He went through hand seals, backing up to gain more time from the incoming Senbon attack. I could have the plants defend me, but I am determined to learn other skills. Futon. Daitapa wind style. Great breakthrough. Naruto called out, taking a deep breath before expelling a moderate-sized gust of wind. Baki's eyes widened at the size of the technique. After all, Naruto was only around 6 years old. He shouldn't be able to perform that technique to such a large extent. But then again, I'm comparing him to human standards, and we aren't sure he's human, Baki mused. They had previously tried to get blood samples to test. Every attempt had been futile, and several people had lost their lives. On the training field, Naruto's jutsu blew the Senbon away before continuing on toward Kankuro, who leapt as far out of the way as possible with his puppet. The wind burst continued on before impacting with the sturdy walls of the training field and dissipating. Kankuro turned back to Naruto to ask him how he did that when he found Naruto in front of him, his hair whipping around his face and horns. Naruto's fist was on a crash course with his face, and he was woefully unable to dodge. The impact sent him flying backward a couple of yards. Winner. Naruto, Baki called out, stopping the match. Naruto walked over to Kankuro and offered his hand, helping him up. That was amazing, Naruto. I'm not even mad that I lost. Kankuro said, picking his discarded puppet up. Not like I would have won anyway if he had used the plants, Kankuro mused. Those plants were freaking strong. He'd seen them from the mansion when they restrained the demon Gaara had turned into. Please clear the field, you two. It's Gaara's and Temari's turn, Baki said. Both nodded before moving to the sidelines. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Gaara's bench that fell apart into sand and followed him. Well, can't let him do me up now, can I? Naruto thought, pointing both open palms at the ground. Kankuro watched as a large couch formed out of soft plants and vines in a matter of moments. Naruto smirked and sat down, gesturing for him to follow, which he did. You two and your competition with your powers, Kankuro shook his head, turning to his two siblings standing in the middle talking to Baki. Well, I can't let Gaara ni-san do better than me, can I? Naruto returned. Kankuro just chuckled, focusing on the match that was just starting. Hajime. Temari immediately went on the offensive. Pulling her fan off her back, she swung it as hard as she could, creating a decently sized force of wind. Gaara narrowed his eyes at the attack. It wasn't a powerful attack but would still hurt if he allowed it to hit. He knew from experience how much it would hurt. Naruto had convinced him to go through training without his sand on some days, and Naruto wouldn't use his plants on those days. In spars, Gaara had gotten hurt for the first time in his life, and it had been a new experience. Gaara found he preferred not getting hurt when possible. Temari grimaced, trying to think of a way to defeat her brother. Her face lit up a moment later. A shinobi must use all options available to them, that's what Baki-sensei taught us. With that in mind, Temari shot off as fast as she could, which was decently fast for her age. Gaara raised an eyebrow at her direct attack, his arms crossed. He hadn't moved since the start. His sand lurched up in a fist shape toward Temari. His eyes widened when his sister didn't dodge or retaliate, just continued running head-on at his sand. Gaara pulled back the sand before it hit his sister, not wanting to severely injure or even kill her. He did not have absolute control over his sand, and there had been a lot of force in that attack. Temari smirked as she saw her plan was working. Yanking off her fan in one quick swing, she fired another burst of wind at her sibling. Futon. Kazakiri no Jutsu, wind release, wind cutter technique. Temari cried, unleashing the most powerful attack she had so far at her younger brother. Gaara's eyes narrowed, realizing she was taking advantage of the fact she was his sister and he cared about her. Gaara growled as the sand swirled around him fiercely before encasing him in a sand dome. The wind attack clashed harmlessly against the sand, and Temari frowned. Gaara's sand was still much faster than her wind, her attacks wouldn't be enough to cut through. Temari tried to move and found both her legs stuck. Looking down, she found sand creeping up her legs. I win, Temari Oni-san, Gaara stated, the sand wrapped around him falling to the ground. Temari sighed, I give up. Winner, Gaara, Baki yelled out, a tad unnecessarily. Gaara nodded before retracting all his sand to the surrounding ground. Naruto walked up a moment later, staring at the sand that was in a rough circle around Gaara. What are you looking at, Naruto ni? Gaara questioned. Gaara, how long can you hold one shape with your sand? Naruto inquired, his pale eyes shifting to Gaara's face. While Naruto directly looking at someone was unneeded as he could see them from anywhere, he did it out of respect and proper manners. A couple of hours, I haven't tried longer than that, Gaara responded, confused. Could you perhaps form some sort of container out of your sand to hold the rest of it? To carry it around with you? Naruto mused, a thinking expression on his face. Gaara's eyes widened slightly in an understanding of what his friend suggested. Concentrating, he focused on a large gourd, as it made the most sense to him to carry all his sand in something like that. A few moments later, the sand swirled together and formed a large gourd in front of him. He directed the rest of his sand inside the sand gourd, creating a cork to go in the top once everything was inside. That works, Naruto commented. Gaara nodded, I'll need to get gear of some kind to attach it to my back. I can help with that, Baki commented. Gaara only nodded in response to his sensei. Next day, Gaara and Naruto walked down the street of Sunagaku, heading toward a restaurant. The villagers ignored them, glared, or moved out of the way. It didn't matter to either of them, they had each other as friends, and the rest of the world's approval was unneeded. Gaara, do you think there is a place out there where people like us can go and not be judged? Not be feared? Naruto abruptly asked, surprising his friend. Gaara didn't immediately answer, taking a few moments to think about it as they strolled down the street. Gaara now carried around the large gourd. He had a wide leather band from his left shoulder to his right hip with which he had attached the sand gourd to his back. I'm not sure Naruto, I've never heard of such a place, Gaara responded eventually. If there isn't, would you want to help me create it? Naruto asked, a small level of childishness coming into his voice. They were after all almost 6 years old, and even with everything they'd gone through, they were still children. Gaara smiled widely, one of the things he had only started doing after meeting Naruto. There was just something about Naruto that made him happy. Of course Naruto, I would love to, Gaara replied sincerely. Awesome. It'll be a village, away from all those who hate people who are different. A place where those that want a place to fit in can come to. A place they won't be judged and hated but loved and cared for. Naruto declared excitedly, I promise I'm going to make such a place one day. Naruto's eyes shone with determination to bring about his new goal. I will do my best to help you reach your goal, Naruto-san, Gaara said calmly. Upon reaching the door to the restaurant he pushed it open and waited for Naruto to walk through. Naruto thanked him, and they sat down at a table. Gaara, it's getting close. I can feel it almost here now. Maybe it will help me complete my goal, Naruto said. Gaara nodded. He was also curious as to what it was that Naruto could feel coming. He'd expressed at one point that he thought it was perhaps his parents, then become depressed for a while, wondering why they would have abandoned him in the desert. Gaara turned as the waiter stopped at their table. Both Naruto and Gaara shared a look at the anger and hatred they could feel coming from the server. He apparently didn't like them, and after they ordered, the man quickly left. I wonder why he hates us. The woman from last week said I killed her daughter, Naruto commented almost absent-mindedly. While Naruto wouldn't resort to killing as his first solution, he had killed many villagers that had attacked him. Gaara nodded, being on the same boat as Naruto and having killed many villagers and inns that had attempted to take his life. Naruto turned back to Gaara, coming out of his musings. Read something interesting recently. It's news from a few years ago, but I only just found a scroll about it. Gaara perked up, interested in what Naruto had to share. Apparently the strongest Biju, the Kyuubi, attacked the Leaf Village. It says that the fourth Hokage killed the fox at the cost of his own life. But something confuses me. According to Shukaku, Biju can't be killed, Naruto thought out loud. That's true, we can't be killed. Most likely Hitomi Oni-san was sealed. They would have had to use a baby as her yokai is too potent to be sealed into anything else. Shukaku's cackling voice rang out in Gaara's head. I thought you were asleep, Gaara mentally replied. Conversation is exciting. Besides listening to the Ki no Ko, tree child, as interesting, Shukaku replied from within the mindscape of Gaara's mind. When Gaara focused back on the real world, he found Naruto patiently looking at him. What did he say? He confirmed what you said, Biju cannot be killed. They have to be sealed. Apparently, the Kyuubi would have to be sealed within a baby, as she can't be sealed into anything else, Gaara replied, enjoying Naruto's shocked expression. Wait, the Kyuubi is a she. Gaara nodded. Huh. Naruto seemed to regain his faraway look. Gaara knew he was either thinking or looking at something that only he could see with his dojutsu. Gaara could seldom tell when Naruto had it activated, he hardly looked different with it on. A few moments later the waiter returned carrying the food, setting it down and glaring at them as he backed away before leaving. Gaara ignored the man with ease, and Naruto's attention was entirely on the food in front of him. "Itadakimasu," they both said calmly before digging in. Neither said anything as they eat, preferring to thoroughly enjoy their food. "Gaara, the food is poisoned. Stop eating it. I'm working to get it out of your system now." Gaara immediately spit out the food, turning to warn Naruto only to find him scrunching up in pain. The next instant Naruto let loose a tremendous scream of pain. Gaara's eyes widened majorly, shock and confusion overwhelming him. "Gaara, the waiter poisoned you and Naruto." The raccoon was cut off as Gaara's chakra spiked dangerously and strong killing intent flowed in thick waves from the boy, choking everyone in the vicinity. His sand started to quickly rush out of the gourd, heading toward the waiter, intent on crushing him. "Gaara, now is not the time. Later. You have to get Naruto to a hospital." Shukaku yelled, cutting through the red haze enveloping his Jinchuriki. He shook his head, realizing the danger his friend was in. Even if Naruto wasn't human, he didn't have a Biju inside of him to heal him from poison. Gaara sent his sand out and wrapped it around Naruto quickly, the killing intent fading only slightly. Picking up his friend, he hurried across the room, sand flowing out from him in waves and moving people, tables, and chairs out of the way. He reached the front doors and blew them off their hinges and into the street without a second thought. Right before he left, he shot the waiter a glare. "You will die," Gaara snarled, his voice dangerous and demonic. The waiter just about near fainted from the killing intent and terror. The next moment Gaara turned and disappeared from view. Soon a hospital. Naruto lay on a hospital bed, Gaara standing right beside him as a medic ran his glowing hands over his friend. Naruto looked terrible, even paler than usual, his muscles strained and sweating profusely. Gaara was fighting hard to keep his emotions under control, wanting to kill everything and anything. "They dared to hurt my brother." Gaara's rage fought to control him, but he kept it under control. He needed to be here and watch over Naruto. Also in the room were his two siblings, his sensei Baki, and the Kaguya. Both his siblings were close by, looking on in concern at Naruto, while Baki and his father waited for the medic to report. "Kaguya-sama, I regret to inform you that there is not much I can tell you about the boy. While I found that he was given a poison strong enough to kill an elephant in a couple of minutes, the rest of his body is actually being blocked from my jutsu," the medic said in obvious confusion. "I don't even know how that's possible," he muttered. "Irrelevant. Can the antidote be made?" The Kaguya demanded sternly. "I don't want to lose such a valuable et to the village." Not only that, but Naruto kept Gaara sane and in control. "Yes, Kaguya-sama, but it's unneeded. His body seems to be rejecting the poison slowly by itself. Make the antidote anyway, I don't want to take any chances," he ordered. The doc nodded before grabbing a syringe from a nearby cart. Gaara's eyes widened as the doctor brought the needle toward his friend's arm. "No, wait," Gaara yelled, but it was too late. Vines shot out of the floor around the bed and the walls. Lashing through the air, they slammed into the medic, throwing the shocked man across the room and into the wall. Gaara and the others in the room watched as the vines moved back and forth around Naruto menacingly, daring anyone else to try to reach the white-haired boy. "Baki, check on Yokigo, carefully," the Kaguya instructed. Baki nodded, slowly moving toward the moaning medic. He had already been hurt by those vines before, and he didn't want to experience that again. The vines seemed to settle a moment later. Wrapping themselves around Naruto, they lifted him off the bed before forming a cocoon that floated between the ceiling and floor, attached to the nearby surfaces like a spider web. "Stay back, Naruto isn't awake. Which means the vines will attack anyone who gets close to him," Gaara warned, already knowing that the vines only truly cared about protecting Naruto. "Will he be okay?" Temari asked shakily. Gaara nodded. "He will. With Naruto." Naruto slowly opened his eyes, pupil-less orbs taking in his surroundings. Sitting up, Naruto looked around. Above him was a beautiful sunset sky, an exotic shading of orange, red and yellow hues. On the ground, he was surrounded by plants of all types, trees of every kind and green thick luscious Think Garden of Eden type place. Naruto got to his feet, confused as to where he was and how he got here. I've never been to such a place, but why does it feel so right? Naruto struggled to find the words to describe how he was feeling. The leaves behind him rustled, making him turn around quickly. Coming through the trees was a beautiful lady, the plants moving out of her way as she walked. Her incredibly long, white hair trailed on the ground behind her. She had pale skin with delicate facial features. Her eyes were white like his, and her eyebrows were cut very short and round, a red shade of lipstick on her lips. She had 2 brown horns that stuck out from her head. Naruto's eyes were suddenly drawn to the 3rd eye in the middle of her forehead. It was red and had rings in it, as well as 9 tomo. She slowed to a stop in front of him, gazing upon him kindly, and for some reason, he felt such warmth as he looked at her. He noticed that she wore a high-collared hime kimono which had tomo running down the center and edges of the gown, adorned with intricate gold and purple lines. "Hello, Naruto." Her voice was elegant and melodic. Naruto's pale eyes met with hers, and they stared at each other for a few moments. Who are you?" Naruto stammered out. The answers were almost here. He could feel it. The beautiful woman smiled slightly sadly at him. "My name is Kaguya Otsutsuki, and I am your mother." Naruto finally snapped, his mouth dropping open in shock as he stared at the woman claiming to be his mother. Abruptly his emotions changed, going from shock to anger. "Where were you?" he yelled at her, the plants around him moving agitatedly. Kaguya frowned. "I was with your father, Masuko." She sighed, seeing him still angry. "I knew he would be upset. Naruto, I have a lot to explain to you. All of your questions will be answered." Her eyes teared up slightly. "But Naruto, I did not stay away because I wanted to. I love you so much, Naruto. It has taken 6 years before I could finally talk to you." Naruto's anger faded and he began to tear up and cry. He knew that she was right. He could feel that she was his mother, and her saying it only confirmed it. And, as she says she loves me. She didn't stay away because she doesn't want me, Naruto thought joyfully. Kaguya fell to her knees and stretched out her arms toward her son. Naruto ran into her embrace, and they hugged, crying in happiness and relief. "I love you so much, Masuko. I'm never going to let you go," Kaguya purred into his ear, holding him tightly in her embrace. "I love you too, mother. I could feel you coming. I'm so glad you are here," Naruto cried, soaking her elegant robes. But Kaguya didn't care about her dresses. The plants around them slowly formed a surface that was comfortable to lay on, and they did, Kaguya laying down and pulling her crying son with her. Naruto cried and cried in happiness, and then sadness, then happiness again, telling her how he was so glad to see her over and over again. She continued to rear him that she was never leaving. "I'm so glad to finally get to see my baby," Kaguya thought. Later, Kaguya rested against the plants, cradling the sleeping Naruto in her arms. She felt so calm, so at peace to finally be holding her son in her arms. She knew the life he had gone through thus far, and she was proud of him, of his want to get stronger and make a place for those that are scorned. She knew the challenges Naruto would eventually face, but that wasn't now. Kaguya felt the change in the air, the warmth of the plants changing ever so slightly. She felt a connection form within her mind. The next moment she felt meaning and thoughts being communicated to her. "Yes, I agree with you, dear. Our son is going to be very strong. I'm so proud of him, and I know you are too," Kaguya thought. Her response was a definite feeling across the connection. She smiled, knowing her husband was happy that he had finally been able to move her entire essence inside Naruto. Her husband had found Naruto's aura on Earth 3 years ago when Naruto lost his adoptive parents, for that was the first time Naruto flared his chakra. It had taken so long to find Naruto because her husband didn't deal well with desserts and his connection to the world wasn't as good in them. He had immediately moved a significant amount of power to the desert to protect their son while he focused on establishing a connection between their son and her. The process took 3 years overall because she contained such a massive amount of power. It was much harder for him to transmit her into their son when their son was in the desert, a place that lacked plant life. Kaguya felt the mental prodding from her husband and sighed, but he looks so adorable sleeping, he's not going to be a young child for much longer, you know. She received a feeling of understanding from her husband. Kaguya pulled Naruto closer as he subconsciously snuggled into her robes. She cooed to him in his sleep, stroking his white hair and running her hand over his horns. His horns are so big for his age, Kaguya said proudly. Okay, I'll wake him up. You're so impatient, dear. Kaguya chuckled at the excited prodding from her husband. Sitting up, she pulled Naruto with her. Wake up, Masuko, we have much to talk about, Kaguya said softly, running her hand through Naruto's somewhat long hair. Naruto murmured, curling up into a smaller ball close to her. Help me out, love, Kaguya thought, smiling at her son. A second later, a fuzzy vine grew out of the ground and wrapped around Naruto before beginning to tickle him. Ha 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 ha. Stop it. Make it stop, ha ha ha. Naruto laughed as he began to wake up, trying to get the tickling vine off of himself. Once he was fully awake, the vine retracted back into the ground. Naruto rubbed his eyes and looked at his smiling mother peacefully. It wasn't a dream then, Naruto said, his voice underlaid with happiness. Kaguya smiled warmly, she just couldn't help it. He's just so cute and adorable. Kaguya thought, receiving her husband's mental agreement and excitement. Naruto-kun, I know you have questions, please ask them. Kaguya's harmonic voice flowed over Naruto, relaxing him and filling him with happiness. Ka-san, what am I? Naruto asked quietly. He had so many questions, but that was what came to mind first. I think that would be best explained by explaining what I am. I'm not human and neither is your father. Naruto nodded, getting comfortable on the soft ground. Kaguya put her hands together eloquently in her lap, collecting her thoughts before beginning. I am a part of a species from another world. We are called Otsutsuki, world eaters. I grew up with my family there for the first 56 years or 80 human years of my life. I became disgusted with what my family did to worlds. We would find the kaminoki of each world and consume it, adding to our own power and causing the destruction of those worlds. Kaguya stopped, being interrupted by Naruto. What is a kaminoki? The pale-eyed boy asked his mother, confusion on his adorable face. At least Kaguya thought so, but she faked annoyance. Hang on, I'll explain that in a minute, giving him a playful glare before continuing. Where was I? Oh, yes. I left my family, traveling across the stars. I came to this world. Finding another kaminoki here, I decided to protect this world from my family. I began to know the inhabitants of this planet, humans. I fell in love with an emperor, and we worked toward peace in the human world together. Kaguya sighed sadly here, and Naruto looked concerned, not wanting to see his mother unhappy. Plants came out of the ground and did their best to comfort the pale-skinned woman. She eventually got herself back under control, stifling the tears that wanted to fall. His name was Tenji, and he was the first person to ever show me love. But it didn't last anywhere near as long as I wanted it to. A neighboring emperor tried to kidnap me, and I killed many of their soldiers in self-defense. Tenji was horrified of my powers and decided to betray me, to prevent a war from breaking out. As Kaguya fought back tears, Naruto moved to her side and hugged her, trying to comfort his mother. Kaguya took a moment to get herself under control once more. Tenji had meant so much to her. He'd never gotten to see his two sons grow up. She sighed before continuing, however, when Tenji's forces and the enemies attempted to capture me, I fled to the Kaminoki. As they converged on me to kill me, I ate the fruit of the god tree, gaining powers beyond my imagination. She chuckled bitterly here. I felt so powerful, I used my power to wipe out the entire army with ease. With my new power, I foolishly thought that I could stop my family from consuming this world. Naruto patiently waited for her to continue, things starting to make sense to him, but he still had many questions. Hey, I was blinded by fear of my family and the pain of Tenji's betrayal. But I was overjoyed when I found that I was pregnant with twins, Tenji being the father. Years passed and my sons were born. I named them Hagoromo and Hamura. They both gained the power of chakra from me. Kaguya turned and looked directly at Naruto. They are your brothers, Naruto, and they convinced me to not go on with my foolish plan. Naruto's eyes widened, but he kept silent. I wanted to turn the world into an army using the tree against my family. But your brothers showed me that I only had the power of one Kaminoki, while my family has consumed hundreds of worlds. I would never stand a chance. She smiled kindly at this. I lost my fear and stress. I didn't have a plan, but I was finally at peace. I began to spend time with my children and the humans, getting to know them and understanding them. It was a year later that I was told I was pregnant with you, and that your birth would kill me. Naruto's eyes widened suddenly, and he looked at her in a mixture of horror and confusion. She did her best to reassure him. Naruto, I did die when you were born, but your father caught my soul and kept me with him over the thousands of years that we waited for you to form. Naruto visibly calmed down, but his confusion was evident. Naruto, you know how the plants protect you? Kaguya asked, and Naruto shakily nodded. That's your father protecting you, Naruto. You see, your father is the Kaminoki, the god tree of this world. Naruto's jaw dropped clean open at that, and she chuckled at his baffled expression. I think I ought to let him explain this, he wants to. Don't freak, okay? She said, holding and rubbing his hand. He nodded at her and gulped, looking around and expecting someone to appear. Naruto nearly fell over backward as he suddenly felt like a part of his mind opened. He could feel things coming through the opening. He could feel memories and warmth, pride directed at him. It took him a bit to understand, but he realized that this was his father. To-san, Naruto thought, and received a mental feeling of positivity. Naruto turned to his mother, still somewhat confused. Why isn't To-san talking? Naruto asked, his head tilted to the side cutely, his mother fighting the urge to squeal at her adorable son. Kaminoki don't communicate the same way humans and we do, Naruto. They use emotions, thoughts, memories, and feelings to communicate with one another. I believe that you will be able to form such connections with others as well, she said, receiving a nod from Naruto. Naruto focused back on the entity he had identified as his father, asking him to explain. The next instant he received an influx of information, feeling, emotion. Naruto's face took on a steady look of shock as he processed all the memories. My father is named Asutsuri. He is the god tree of this world, Naruto thought in awe. He could feel the power his father possessed. He watched the glimpses of memories, his father and his mother watching over the human race, waiting for him to eventually form together. He smiled as he saw his mother and father joke and talk together. He watched his parents separate his father's power and spread it over the world. He watched them give bloodlines to the humans, preparing them for the eventual coming of the Otsutsuki. Naruto frowned as he watched the memories of the humans abusing their gifts, using it for war and destruction. Naruto gathered his thoughts as the influx of memories came to a stop, his father's warmth and love for him permeating him. A lot of my questions have been answered. I understand what I am now. I'm not human, I'm Otsutsuki and Kaminoki. Naruto said, more to himself than his mother. But she nodded anyway and smiled at him, loving his thinking expression. Naruto suddenly looked up, staring into her eyes with intensity. You and Tu-san aren't going to leave me, are you? Naruto asked, fear and hope, suspicion and want in his voice. He was uncertain. No, Naruto-kun, we are never going to leave you. Asset-kun has moved me and my power within you. It was going to take a couple more months, but it sped up when you were in danger. Kaguya smiled warmly at her son, reaching out and hugging him. We are never going to leave you, Masuko. Naruto smiled brightly, grinning in joy as he hugged his mother back strongly. Thank you for coming for me, mother. Thank you for loving me, Naruto said. In his mind, he was communicating the same feeling and thankfulness to his father through the link, receiving a sense of affection in return. Naruto sighed in happiness, so happy to have finally found his parents. A question suddenly popped into his mind. Ka-san, where are we and how do I come back to it? We are inside your mindscape, Naruto. Naruto tilted his head in confusion, and in the next moment memories flowed into his head from his father, and he suddenly understood what a mindscape was. Oh, I get it now, Naruto exclaimed, and Kaguya gave him a look. Asset-kun explained it to you, didn't he? Naruto nodded happily in response. Kaguya only sighed, ruffling her son's shaggy hair. Naruto grinned, before pointing at her forehead. Ka-san, why do you have a third eye in your forehead? Naruto asked innocently. She chuckled, her third eye blinking sideways before turning and looking at Naruto. This was something I gained from your father when I ate the fruit. It's called the Rinne Sharingan, and when you are older, I will teach you how to use yours. At this, Naruto became very excited, clapping his hands together. I have one too. How do I open it? I didn't even know I had one. Naruto shouted out his questions, making his mother raise a delicate finger to his lips, quieting him down. Not so loud, Masuko. I can tell you how to open your eye, but don't do it in front of everyone else. They don't need to know you have it until you know how to use it, she warned, making sure Naruto nodded. Here, channel your chakra in a large amount to this spot in your forehead, she said, placing 2 fingers on Naruto's forehead. Naruto's face scrunched up in adorable concentration as he focused. He's so cute. I know he's normally so much more mature, but I'm overjoyed to see he's okay with relaxing and being a child around us, Kaguya thought. Naruto channeled the chakra and felt the skin on his forehead shift. Kaguya watched as the skin on her son's forehead moved horizontally out of the way of a red eye. It had red sclerae and irides, with a ripple pattern spreading over the eyeball and one tomo. She smiled. It seems you will need to train to gain all your tomo, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded, and the next moment she felt another burst of chakra from him. Surprised, she looked at him and saw nothing visibly change, his face blank for a moment before he grinned. What did you just do, Naruto-kun? She asked curiously. I activated my Byakugan and looked at my forehead. Naruto explained distractedly, obviously still happy with his new eye. It was almost like a child getting a new toy that they really wanted. Kaguya was shocked and amazed. She couldn't tell that it was his Byakugan that activated. Even hers pulsed the veins around her eyes upon being activated. That's amazing, his Byakugan doesn't visibly show the difference between on and off. That's a major advantage against enemies. Kaguya thought in amazement. The next moment she felt thoughts from her husband explaining that he had been the one to change the Otsutsuki's inherited ability into something more powerful. She nodded and sent him back a feeling of thanks, having learned to communicate in his way over the years. Naruto was still playing with his new eye when she focused back on him, opening and closing the eye and looking around with it. Mother, it's so weird being able to see out of 3 eyes, Naruto remarked, all 3 of his eyes turning and looking at her. She smiled at her son. You get used to it, Masuko. Now close it for now. We still have a few things to talk about before you wake up, Kaguya ordered. Naruto nodded and complied. Naruto's face abruptly lit up. I totally forgot about Gaara, and Temari and Kankuro. They are probably worried about me. Naruto cried, obviously upset and concerned for his friends. Is Gaara the one with the smallest amount of my power? Kaguya asked curiously. Naruto looked at her in confusion. Understanding, she explained. All 9 Biju are made up of pieces of my power that my son Hagoromo split up before his death, she explained, getting a nod. Don't worry about your friends, you can explain to them once you wake up. Asset-kun has protected your body in the real world for right now while we talk, Kaguya urged her son. Hi, Naruto replied gratefully. Kaguya settled into a more comfortable position, gaining her son's attention. Her long white hair blew in the gentle breeze. Masuko, do you have a goal in life? You don't have to, I'm just curious. Kaguya asked, having picked up on his thoughts before he was poisoned, something about wanting to create a village for those that are different. Naruto was silent for some time, staring at the ground. She patiently waited for him to speak, happy to just be near him finally. She could feel her husband's presence entirely focused on their conversation. She smiled, knowing that this was important to him as well. Asutsuri was a MIV conscious, and he kept track of many things at one time, so completely getting his attention meant he either cared about something or it was important. Naruto had a solemn thinking expression as he pondered her question before answering, first entirely thinking through his life thus far and everything he had learned from his parents. Ka-san, before I answer that, what do you want me to do? My goals are not as important as yours and Two-san's, Naruto replied seriously, his maturity showing. Kaguya smiled sadly at him. Naruto-kun, while we do wish for you to eventually protect this world against the Otsutsuki with our help, that is not what I asked. Your father and I want to know your goals. Our wants can wait until you are ready, Kaguya said kindly, not sugar-coating anything. Naruto wasn't bothered by her straight-to-the-point response. He understood his purpose given to him by his parents and was determined to complete it one day. I want to travel the world, get stronger, and eventually create a village where people like me aren't hated and feared. A place for those that want to be safe, to actually be safe. I want to be the strongest, Ka-san. So I can protect you, and those who are close to me, like Gaara-ni, Temari-oni, and Kankuro Baka, he answered with determination and clarity. Kaguya smiled softly when she heard his answer. Warmth enveloped Naruto from his connection with his father, showing his approval. Do you want to bring peace to the world? She asked and was somewhat surprised when he shook his head, no. Naruto's pupil-less eyes glinted, and she realized that he had thought about this a lot. That is not my desire. I do want peace, but I only desire it for myself and my people. Bringing peace to a world of people whose mindsets are all about violence is foolish. I believe in peace through sharing the same ideals and through tolerance. If we all have the same views and morals, then we will have peace. Tolerating others without provoking them, along with having the necessary power to scare and repel them should they deem our peace a threat, that is the true way to peace in my opinion, Naruto said, his face adopting a mature expression way beyond his years. His eyes spoke of knowledge to be obtained and experienced. Kaguya smiled. There is that maturity all Otsutsuki show at a young age, she thought. But, isn't that a little selfish and isolated thinking? Kaguya prompted, seeing if her son was willing to defend his ideas. Naruto shook his head again and smiled at her brightly, brushing one of his bangs out of his face and over his horn. I don't believe so, Ka-san, and I know you agree with me. One cannot bring peace by forcing others to accept their views. You need to give them the chance to decide for themselves. If they truly desire peace, then they will consider what you're saying, and they will surely take a look at the peace you have created. It's their choice after that if they want to be like you or not. Kaguya nodded, a kind smile on her face. She agreed with her son entirely. It was a belief she had also formed over the thousands of years from watching the humans war in battle. You are an intelligent boy, Masuko. You will go on to do great things and protect the humans from my family, Kaguya thought, feeling an approval from her husband. I'm impressed, Naruto. That was very mature and reasonable goal, Kaguya praised. Naruto blushed and in a second was back into his childlike persona, rubbing the back of his white-haired head in emberment. Kaguya smiled and pulled Naruto in for another hug. Sitting him on her lap, she rubbed one of his horns. Naruto giggled at the tickling sensation. Well, I do believe Acid-kun has something to give you, Kaguya said, tickling Naruto some more and enticing laughter and giggles from him. She eventually stopped and set Naruto down in front of her. She smiled as she really took in what he was wearing for the first time. Naruto-kun, did you pick those clothes? She asked. Naruto suddenly looked concerned. Yeah. Are they okay? Kaguya smiled at his worry. They are great, Naruto-kun. I just thought you would like to know that you choose the traditional clothing the Otsutsuki wear without realizing it, she explained. He was confused as to how that had happened. They were both interrupted by a ping within their mind. Naruto focused once again on his father, his wants, pride, and joy. His father wanted to give him a bloodline he had invented and reserved for him expressly, never giving it to anyone else. Naruto was overjoyed and pushed his thanks and gratitude through the connection, feeling his father happy. It seems he's ready to give you the bloodline he created. He was quite proud of himself when he made it, you know, Kaguya said teasingly, getting a mental pout from her husband, making her giggle. Naruto could feel his father connect to the plants around him once more. He watched as a large vine grew out of the ground before slowly curling around him. As it began to cover his face, he heard his mother speaking. I will see you again when you wake up, Naruto-kun. Don't talk out loud, just think it. I'm now within you, my son, Kaguya said warmly. Naruto loved seeing her smile. The next moment the vines wrapped over his eyes and his mother disappeared from view. He felt a warmth envelop him from the vines and the next moment he fell asleep. I love you, my Masuko. 3 days later. Real world. Naruto opened his eyes and recognized the leaves and vines of his father's plants. His Byakugan activated and he looked around the room he was in. It was a hospital room, and Naruto could see Gaara asleep on a chair in the corner. Naruto smiled, touched that Gaara would be watching over him while he was talking to his parents. Naruto took a few moments, feeling how his body felt, different, lighter, full of energy. Naruto connected to the plants, and they slowly unwrapped from his form, lowering him to his feet on the floor before sliding back into the walls and disappearing. Naruto turned toward Gaara, deactivating his dojutsu as he walked over and shook Gaara awake. Naruto. Naruto. Gaara jumped up in an uncharacteristic display of happiness and hugged him. Naruto smiled and returned the hug, holding it for a few moments before separating. I was so concerned. It wasn't until Shukaku explained to me that you were talking to your parents that I calmed down, Gaara explained quickly. Naruto smiled. I'm okay now, Gaara-ni. I did meet my parents, and I'm so glad that I did. Did Shukaku explain to you who and what I am? Naruto asked curiously. Gaara nodded, new respect in his eyes. Hey Gaara, this doesn't change anything, you know. We are still brothers, Naruto urged. Gaara seemed to be relieved and visibly relaxed. He understood and didn't press the issue. Gaara's face suddenly took on a confused look. Shukaku wants to talk to you. He says you may not know how to do that yet though, Gaara said, evidently confused as to how Naruto was going to talk to the demon inside his head. Naruto frowned. Two-san can connect to minds, and Ka-san said that I could as well, Naruto mused. Naruto, you can. Just focus on him, his feeling, his aura, extend your senses toward him and try to enter his mind, imagine it. Naruto heard his mother's harmonic voice within his head. Ah, you think my voice is beautiful, Masuko, thank you. Naruto nodded, slightly embered before focusing on Gaara. He extended an open hand toward Gaara and tried to feel him. It took him a couple of moments, in which Gaara stood there patiently. Finally, he felt an opening in the walls of Gaara's mind. He could feel Gaara on the other side. Pushing farther in through the opening, he found Shukaku sitting inside a desert looking up at the sky. This must be Gaara's mindscape. All Jinchuriki have one according to Tu-san. Hello Shukaku, Naruto said, appearing in the sand at the feet of the Miv sand raccoon. Shukaku looked down at him, his giant eye drawing closer to Naruto's short stature. Hey, down there Naruto-sama. The Biju called out in his usual, cackling, insane voice. Please don't call me Sama, there is no need, Naruto replied. The Tanuki nodded. You must be wondering why I asked to speak to you. I want to give you my rent, so to speak. Shukaku yelled loudly, confusing Naruto and making his ears ring. Rent. Naruto shouted, his ears still ringing. Yeah, all us Biju are made from pieces of Kaguya Obaa-san. When we learned she was still alive, and Kaminoki-sama had her with him, we all began creating reserves of yokai equal to what we had to give back to her upon your arrival, the crazy raccoon dog explained, his voice near deafening. Naruto looked at the giant sand creature in confusion. Yokai is different from chakra. It's more potent and is what my power is made up from. It's what all the 9 Biju were created from, by your brother. Kaguya's voice rang out in Naruto's mind, and he nodded. What do I need to do then? Naruto asked. No clue. I know Kaguya Obaa-san has a way to absorb chakra. Zetsu Oji said not to worry about it, Shukaku replied, slightly quieter than before, which didn't really matter as he was so freaking loud. Naruto was confused as to who Zetsu Oji was but didn't worry about it. Naruto, let me control your body for a moment, I'm going to absorb Shukaku Mago's rent, as he put it, Kaguya said and chuckled at her grandchild's antics. Naruto nodded before allowing his mother to control his body. Gaara appeared in the sand at that moment, a short way off to Naruto's left. Oh, hey Gaara, what took you so long? Naruto asked. He apparently still had control over his voice, and his mother waited until he was done. Well, I wasn't sure you had succeeded in connecting until I heard Shukaku yelling, Gaara commented dryly. Shukaku grinned. I tried to come into my mind but it's rather difficult to do when Shukaku is shouting. But I heard everything. Naruto nodded. Okay Ka-san, when you are ready. Naruto turned back to the giant raccoon, feeling his mother raise his arms toward Shukaku. Shukaku grinned maniacally and pushed all his reserves to the surface in front of him to be absorbed. Naruto felt his third eye open, and he suddenly gained another field of vision that mixed with his other two, allowing him a more significant range of natural sight. His younger Rinne Sharingan spun, and Naruto found himself emitting words that were not his own. Fujutsu Kyuin. Naruto's third eye spun faster. Gaara watched on the side in amazement as a see-through barrier formed around Naruto, drawing light brown yokai into him at a rapid pace from Shukaku. The process took only a few moments before Naruto lowered his hands, canceling the flow from Shukaku who was panting dramatically. Gaara rolled his eyes at Shukaku's love for the dramatics. Dang, losing half of my entire yokai is no joke. Naruto gave a small bow. My apologies, but thank you for your contribution to my mother, Naruto said politely. As he stood back up, Gaara noticed that another Tomo had formed in Naruto's third eye, giving him two. The horizontal eyelid closed a moment later. See you back outside Gaara, Naruto said, looking at his friend. Gaara nodded, and Naruto disappeared from the seal. Regaining control of his body's senses, Naruto stepped back as Gaara's glazed eyes regained their focus. So, What will you do now, Naruto ni? Gaara asked curiously. Naruto shrugged. I want to explore the elemental nations, gain experience and power, and eventually create my own village. But I don't want to leave my friends either, Naruto mused out loud. He stopped when he suddenly sensed someone approaching down the hall. Seems someone is coming, shall we go? Naruto proposed. Gaara silently nodded, and they moved toward the window. It was opened by Gaara's sand, and they both slipped out. As they fell, they were both caught by their own protections and deposited on the ground before they took off at a run toward the Cage mansion. The medic stepped into the room to check on the demon's condition and dropped his clipboard when he found the place entirely empty. Quickly turning around, he ran off to report to the Cage that Naruto was now awake. Naruto and Gaara reached the mansion a few moments later, opening the large doors and entering. Gaara, is that you? Temari's voice echoed out of the living room doorway before Temari herself stepped through. Naruto, she shouted, dashing across the greeting area and giving Naruto a hug, almost knocking the smaller boy over. Hey Temari Oni, good to see you too, Naruto said after he regained his breath from being bowled into by the hyper-blonde. We were so worried about you. I was going to beat up that guy that poisoned you, but Temari trailed off, unsure how to continue. Naruto separated himself from her hug and gave Gaara a look. You killed him, didn't you? Gaara didn't visibly respond, but Naruto knew he was right. You didn't have to do that, Naruto sighed, running a hand through his white locks. But thank you for looking out for me. Naruto smiled. Temari had an uncertain look on her face but got over it as Gaara smiled. Flashback. As the moon shone down over the village, a roof lit up from the reflected moonlight and a figure carrying a large gourd could be made out. A bloodthirsty grin was on his face as he looked out at the village in front of him. You will pay for hurting Naruto ni, he yelled, leaping off the roof. He was helped through the air by the sand. Running along the rooftops, he channeled chakra to his nose like Baki sensei taught him, searching for the scent of the man that had poisoned he and Naruto. Gaara had just left the hospital, having stayed there late into the night after Naruto had been cocooned in vines. Once he was sure that Naruto was okay, he'd left by the window to find the man who had dared try to kill his brother. It took Gaara a couple of hours with the help of Shukaku to find the man. The man had quite the head start as Gaara had told him almost 7 hours earlier that he was going to come back and kill him. Gaara finally locked onto his scent and followed it into a darker part of the village. Dropping down to the street, he slowly walked toward the battered hotel he knew the man was in. A few villagers saw his bloodthirsty eyes and maniacal smile, and quickly hightailed it out of there. As he walked, 2 drunk men noticed him. Hey, kid, hand us your money, and you won't get hurt, one laughed, downing more sake from a bottle and holding a blade in his other hand. Gaara ignored him, intent on his prey. The man didn't like being ignored and threw his knife at Gaara. It didn't get even close to him before being grabbed in midair by the sand. Gaara's savage green eyes turned toward the man. Looking over his shoulder, he raised his right hand toward the men, his grin becoming more and more insane. Within the seal, Shukaku tried to calm the boy down, but gave it up as a lost cause. He didn't really care if the idiots died. Morons deserved it anyway for picking a fight with Gaara. Die! Gaara yelled, his sand slithering quickly across the ground before wrapping around the men faster than they could react. Gaara's eyes grew more full, more bloodthirsty, more insane. Yes. They will all pay. Sabaku Q, sand coffin. Gaara snarled demonically, his sand compressing down on the struggling and now screaming men. Sabaku Soso, sand burial. Gaara's eyes stretched as he closed his hand. The sand imploded fiercely, blood flying onto the walls of the nearby buildings. Gaara didn't bat an eye. In fact, he seemed to almost relish it as he retracted his sand back into his gourd, resuming his stalking of the prey. Within the 5th floor of the hotel, the waiter named Dakota was trembling and pale as a sheet. He had seen Gaara kill those men without mercy, and Gaara was unquestionably coming for him. There was no escape. Gaara was already reaching the front of the hotel, and there was no other way that he could get out. "Oh God, what have I done?" the man murmured in fear, Gaara disappearing from his view into the building. A moment later he heard cries and crashing from below him. He cowered in the corner of his hotel room, shaking horribly. "I know you are here." A crazed voice echoed down the halls of the hotel. He whimpered in fear, cowering further into the corner. You dared to attack someone precious to me." The crazy voice was closer now. A moment later a door could be heard exploding violently on the floor below. Come out wherever you are. The sand wants your blood." The voice rang out, almost singing. Dakota could feel himself going mad from fear. He wanted to die. The killing intent saturating the air was nearly as strong as the Ikibe's, and it was wholly directed at him. He could literally feel himself going insane. "Found you!" a demonic voice cried out gleefully. The next moment his door was shattered to pieces. Standing in the hall was the bloodthirsty Gaara, staring at him with wide, bloodshot eyes. Dakota was foaming at the mouth, pressed as far as he could against the wall. Dakota suddenly decided to throw himself from the window, uncaring if he died or not, just wanting to escape the pressure, the killing intent weighing down on him, making him watch his own death over and over again. "You will not escape me!" Gaara cried, his sand shooting across the hotel room, covering the walls and reaching Dakota as he attempted to get the window open frantically. He screamed as the sand wrapped around him, pulling him away from the window and back toward Gaara, who had his palm extended toward him. "Sabaku Soso, sand burial." Gaara closed his palm, a miv grin on his face as the sand crushed down on the screaming form of Dakota. The next moment the pressure built to extremes and the sand exploded in a fountain of blood, covering Gaara and the walls of the hotel. Gaara panted heavily, feeling satisfaction at having avenged his friend. He slowly regained his composure, turned, walked back down the halls and out of the hotel. "Gaara, when you go home and get a new change of clothes, we need to talk." The uncharacteristically serious voice of Shukaku sounded in his head. Gaara nodded and continued making his way home. End flashback. Naruto and Gaara were now sitting in the living room, both sitting cross-legged and making the ram seal. Temari sat on a nearby couch, watching the two motionless boys sit on the carpet with their eyes closed. They had been doing this for almost a half hour after Naruto came back, saying hi to Kankuro and explaining what happened when he got poisoned. He also said that all his questions had been answered while he was in the coma, Temari thought, though when Kankuro had asked him what he meant he declined to explain further. Directly after that, both boys moved into the living room and sat down and had been there since. Temari was bored and was just about to get up and find something else to do when Naruto and Gaara stirred at the exact same time, which was slightly creepy. "You didn't explain how that will work out, you know," Gaara suddenly said, confusing Temari greatly. She became only more confused by Naruto's answer. "I'm still working out a solution, I need time to think," Naruto replied, slowly walking away, his white kimono fluttering lightly. Gaara nodded in response. "Gaara, what the heck was that about?" Temari near shouted at her brother. Gaara's blank green eyes turned to her. "Naruto ni has finally found the truth to his life and is deciding what to do with his life from now on," Gaara replied cryptically. "Wait, does this mean he is leaving?" Temari asked, shocked. Gaara shrugged. "Perhaps. He doesn't know yet." Temari shook her head. "What was that thing you two just did for the past 30 minutes? Gaara stood and walked past her toward the entrance. "A thing?" Gaara said as he walked by, making her face fall at her brother's new love for being confusing as. The hot blistering sun of the desert shone on Suna, beating down mercilessly upon the residents' heads. One white-haired boy was not at all bothered by this though. While he didn't like the bright sun, preferring the moon, the warmth was nice. Naruto Otsutsuki Kaminoki was sitting on the roof of the Cage mansion, his activated dojutsu staring blankly out over the village and down one of the main streets where villagers moved to and fro. The villagers were always giving the Cage mansion an even wider berth than they did before he came to live here. Questions. It truly is the recurring theme in my life, Naruto decided. He was at an imp. A large part of him wanted to just leave Suna and go out and learn, experience, find his nieces and nephews, and then create his own village. On the opposite hand, he didn't want to leave his friends and miss growing up with them in the academy. It had been 3 days since he had woken up from his coma and he had since put all his thought into this. His father had told him that when he reached the second level of his bloodline, he would be able to form a unique style of cloning himself. But that wouldn't be for some time. Ka-san suggested like 8 different types of clones for me to use, but none would last long enough or survive any sort of hit. Baki would surely realize, Naruto mused. Kaguya hummed to herself within her son's mind, allowing him to figure out how he wanted to go about this in his own way. She only offered her advice and opinion when he asked for it because she wanted him to grow on his own. I'll always be here for him when he needs me though. Naruto mused. Getting up, he walked to the other side of the roof, looking down at where he'd already seen Gaara practicing earlier. Naruto extended his hand and being toward Gaara, slowing his breathing and opening a gateway between them. Gaara ni, can you hear me? Naruto thought. On the ground below, Gaara stopped and turned, looking up at him with scrunched eyes. Yes ni-san, was his near monotone reply. Naruto smiled. He was getting better at this slowly. I've had a thought, something I want your opinion on. The only thing keeping me in this village is you, and I don't want to leave you. I want to suggest that we both leave the village, Naruto started. Gaara gave him a curious look but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I'm not saying abandon your siblings, but that we go out ahead to make a better place. Once we have made our own village they could come to us if they want, Naruto finished, watching as Gaara looked back down at the ground and thought about it. At that moment Tamari walked out of the house. Gaara, what did you do with the TV remote again? She asked loudly. Gaara turned to his sister and they began talking. I'll think about it ni-san, was Gaara's reply over the link before he wholly focused on his semi-enraged sister. Naruto nodded, turning back to the village and forcing his vision to zoom across it, seeing everything. Naruto sighed. Ka-san, Tu-san, I am ready to begin my training now. Naruto could feel his mother smile in his mindscape. Okay. You need a place to train where no one will find you. The people of this village will try to catch you and replicate your bloodline if they learn how powerful it is, Kaguya instructed. Naruto nodded and vaulted off the roof, using chakra to empower his limbs as Baki had taught him. Sometime later he came to the wall of Sunagakur, the high sand cliffs that towered around the village and gave it protection against invaders. Jumping as high as he could, he was met by his plants reaching out from the wall, forming platforms to help him continue to leap higher and higher up. He finally reached the top and climbed into a spacious, open flat area. I really need to learn how to walk on surfaces, Naruto mused. Baki hadn't taught them that yet. Sit down Naruto-kun, and I will explain your bloodline in more detail, Kaguya ordered. The white-haired boy nodded. Now, there is a range of techniques that you can use in the first level of your bloodline, and you can develop more. Kaguya switched into a mother lecture voice, like the one your mother gets when she's explaining how to use the stove for the first time. There are 3 levels to this bloodline, and you are currently at level 1. You may have noticed when you woke up that you felt different. Naruto nodded. Now that he thought about it, he had felt different, but he couldn't describe the feeling. There are many things you can do with this level, but I will start with 2 basics. The first is your ability to dissolve yourself into chakra, which has two forms, and the second is your ability to create things out of chakra. These two techniques don't have a name because, honestly, we have never bothered to give them any, Kaguya lectured, getting a mental nod from her horned child. Childcare. Now, as you know, you aren't human. Due to your father, you are already mostly an entity of chakra that has taken a physical form that looks like Otsutsuki. Naruto raised an interested eyebrow at this. That reminds me of the Biju, living entities of chakra, he mused. Kaguya nodded. That's because you are very similar to them. This bloodline is easier for you to use because of that, and it would be easier for them to use as well. Though your two-san has refused to give it to them. Kaguya chuckled at that, remembering the five-tail monkey begging on hands and knees dramatically. Anyway, this bloodline, at its basics, allows you to switch between your chakra entity-like form and your physical form much easier than you would be able to do otherwise. If this bloodline were given to a human, they wouldn't survive it without a biju in them or some other large chakra source. They would also go through intense pain when they moved to the second level, as well as releasing a chakra pulse large enough to alert the entire elemental nations. Kaguya continued on in her lecture, Naruto quietly absorbing what his mother was teaching him. So, one of the abilities you gain distinctly from this bloodline is your ability to construct objects out of your chakra. This is helped along by the extreme control over chakra that you attain from this bloodline. In fact, you will never have to do chakra control exercises no matter how much chakra you have, Kaguya explained, feeling Naruto's excitement. Naruto had already gone through some intense chakra control under Baki just to be able to use any jutsu, and he didn't like it. He'd found he had enormous reserves for his age. Though once he awakens his Rinnegan that wouldn't have mattered anyway, Kaguya mused. Using this ability, you can create almost anything out of your chakra, whether it be clothes, weapons, or things you can throw, as long as you know what the object looks like. Kaguya continued, this skill was inspired by the Rinnegan's creation of all things technique, but you won't be able to create living beings or the actual materials of objects like the Rinnegan can. Also, if you master your bloodline, you can use it in replacement of the normal ninjutsu and genjutsu that shinobi use. Instead, you will use moves that utilize chakra in its purest form and control to achieve similar effects. This bloodline allows you to do MIV amounts of damage and not use up nearly any chakra at all. The last thing for right now, I want you to will yourself to dissolve into chakra. If it works, your body will melt, and you will become a cloud composed of chakra, Kaguya ordered. Naruto stood, concentrating on making his body dissolve as his mother wanted. A couple of minutes later, Naruto's focused expression became calm, and he slowly started to vaporize from the legs up into black and white chakra, dissipating into the air like smoke. The smog didn't move and hovered right where Naruto had been. Excellent, Naruto, Kaguya praised. Okay, now attempt to rematerialize, she ordered, carefully watching Naruto's body from the inside. This technique is extremely useful as it teleports a person away by dissolving their body into chakra. While effective and useful, it has a nasty side effect if done wrong. There is a chance to lose parts of one's body. But Kaguya was confident that her son would figure it out, he was already brilliant. She still wanted to have some fun at his expense though. A moment later the smoke started condensing into a roughly humanoid form the size of Naruto. Once it solidified, Kaguya broke out laughing at what she could see. Naruto's head was coming out of his left shoulder, while his left arm was coming out of his neck. His right leg was coming out of his spine and his right arm out of his left leg socket. Basically, it didn't really work. Hey, what happened to me? Naruto freaked out as he tried to move, which just resulted in him falling down on his face, arm, elbow. Oh, that was priceless. Ha 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 ha. Kaguya nearly rolled around on the floor of the mindscape, just barely keeping her dignity. She was unable to contain her laughter at Naruto's expense, who was quite stuck in doing his best to send his mother a mental glare from his awkward position. It's okay, Naruto-kun, it will take a while to get this right, Kaguya chuckled. Channeling her potent yokai through Naruto's body, she took temporary control of him and dissolved his body back into smoke. A moment later he reformed correctly. Naruto breathed deeply for a couple of moments. That was so weird, but really cool. Naruto yelled excitedly. Kaguya just smiled at her son, enjoying another one of his childish outbursts. Naruto was about to try it again when Kaguya stopped him. Naruto-kun, wait on that for now. I want to teach you the other form of this ability. Naruto stopped concentrating on dissolving himself and stood straight, waiting for his mother to continue. Naruto, focus on two strands. These two strands rotate around each other over and over again, feel the motion and allow your feeling to flow. This is the secret to the bloodline. Your father invented it, so it's mostly used by feelings. You will get better at the first form once you understand this, Kaguya lectured, getting a nod from her pale-eyed, horned son. Naruto relaxed his body, closing his pale eyes as he imagined two strands rotating around each other. He felt like he was falling for a moment. Opening his eyes, he found his vision to be like his Byakugan, though it wasn't activated. He could see 360 degrees around himself. Looking inward, he discovered his body missing and instead there were two strands of black and white chakra rotating around each other, like a dual helix. This is so cool, Naruto exclaimed. Kaguya laughed. Now, feel and want to go to the top of the Cage mansion. Naruto did so, and he was amazed to find himself flying through the air at high speeds, the two strands rotating around each other faster as he flew through the air. He reached the top of the mansion a moment later, and settled on its surface, his body reforming between the two strands before they were fully absorbed into him. Naruto abruptly felt extreme exhaustion, his body not used to switching between pure chakra and a physical form. Naruto stumbled across the roof a couple of steps before regaining his control. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Kaguya asked worriedly. Naruto nodded. I'm fine, Ka-san, that was just really tiring and strange. While he felt right being a pure chakra construct, he wasn't used to it. That's good, Naruto-kun. You may want to know that you left your clothes on top of the wall though, Kaguya said teasingly. Naruto froze and glanced down for the first time, realizing that he had, in fact, not brought his clothes with him when he traveled to the top of the mansion. Naruto's face burned red in emberment, and he attempted to cover himself. Ha 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 ha. Naruto could hear his mother's laughter in his mind. She almost sounded like she was crying. Naruto was trying to figure out how to get off the roof and into his room to get another set of clothes. Haha, that was so funny. Kaguya giggled at her son's expense. Oh okay Naruto, don't worry about it. You know how I said you can form things out of your chakra. Naruto nodded, realizing what she was saying. Naruto needed no guidance, his emberment and need for clothes transmitting with his chakra very clearly. In under 5 seconds, his old kimono and sash formed around him, covering his dignity before it could be destroyed. Naruto breathed deeply then froze again as a new thought hit him. My clothes fell off the first time I tried to dissolve into chakra, didn't they? Naruto questioned suspiciously. Yep, was Kaguya's laughing and giggling reply. Mother. Naruto huffed, only getting more laughter. Naruto shook his head and decided to try the smoke technique again. Concentrating and ignoring his mother's slowing giggles, he dissolved into black and white smoke. He then moved swiftly through the air to his window and seeped through the crack beneath it. Once entirely inside, he formed, with clothes on this time, inside his room, collapsing down on the bed in exhaustion. Naruto took a few moments to get himself under control. Ka-san, what else will I be learning? I want to make sure to know shinobi skills as well, Naruto asked. Ah, Well, you see, Naruto raised an eyebrow, confused. Naruto was sure his mother sounded distinctly embered. Before Naruto could piece it together, he felt his father connect to his mind and knowledge ped through. You don't actually have any shinobi training, ha ha ha. Naruto laughed, enjoying having something over his mother as revenge for the prank with his clothes. Kaguya moped, her red lips curling cutely. Naruto was sent a mental image of her face by his father, which only made him laugh harder. He could feel his father's equivalent to laughter through the link as well. Stop it, Kaguya shouted playfully, pretending to pout. Naruto's laughter decreased, and he regained his usual calm. My apologies, mother, that was just too funny. You're the creator of all chakra on Earth, and watched humans since they gained it, and you don't actually know any of their training, Naruto teased. Kaguya pouted harder. It's not my fault, it wasn't important. I never needed to know ninjutsu, and ninshu isn't a fighting art. Besides, I'll know after I regain all my chakra from the biju, and with it their memories. Kaguya defended. Naruto just chuckled before letting the matter drop. So essentially I'm going to need a sensei to teach me basics? Naruto asked. He received a pouty nod from his mother, who was still worked up over his teasing. Mother, know that you not being able to train me doesn't matter to me. I'm overjoyed to simply have you and Tu-san be a part of my life and be someone to love and talk to. Naruto said kindly, channeling his love and appreciation through the mind link to both parents. Ah, thank you Naruto-kun. We love you too, Kaguya replied warmly. Love and protectiveness flowed from the link of his father as well. Konoha. Nakata awoke with a start, not knowing where he was. He moved around and knocked the box over, falling out with a splash and rolling across the muddy alleyway before coming to a stop. It was raining. Of course it is, Nakata thought as he pushed himself to his feet and rubbed his shoulders, trying to bring some warmth into his frail body. Nakata shook his head to get the mud out of his hair as he walked down the alleyway. As he walked, he saw his reflection in a puddle. He had spiky red hair and violet eyes. On both sides of his face were 3 whisker marks. He was wearing tattered rags that were already soaked from the rain, and while he looked mostly healthy, one could tell he didn't get food very often. Covering what was visible of his skin were scars of all shapes and sizes. He was hungry and he needed to find food. He headed toward the marketplace, hoping to get lucky. Very few shops would be open this early and in the rain. Nakata's nose twitched as he picked up the strong smell of cinnamon rolls. Moments later, he found the stand that was selling them. It was a friendly-looking place, warm light filling the inside as the cinnamon-scented smoke poured out of a small pipe at the top. Nakata started walking toward it but froze before he left the safety of the alleyway. He'll just throw me out, and then I'll be spotted by everyone, Nakata realized. Steeling himself, he moved through the shadows of the buildings. A couple of minutes later he made it to the side of the stand, trying to work up a plan to steal some food. He suddenly tensed as a lady with red eyes, black hair and a gray raincoat came up to the stand. Hey, can I get 5 cinnamon rolls to go? The lady asked. Nakata couldn't see the owner's response, but he guessed that he nodded. Nakata knew that he needed to take advantage of the man's distraction to snatch some food. Slowly, he crawled backward and out of the sight of the red-eyed lady. For a moment he thought she'd spotted him, but she turned her attention elsewhere. A man with a cigarette in his mouth had just walked up to her and they started talking. Nakata ignored their conversation as it didn't matter to him what they were saying. He slipped inside the back of the stall and crawled under the tables, spying the fresh cinnamon rolls on a tray. The owner was walking back to the front counter to hand the lady her order. Now, Nakata thought. Darting out from under the counter he grabbed 2 rolls, but the lady with the red eyes spotted him. Sir, she said to the baker while pointing at Nakata. Turning as quickly as he could, Nakata rushed out of the stall. But the owner turned just fast enough to see him running and recognize his whiskers. "It's the demon brat," the owner roared, seizing a slicing knife off his counter and taking off after the demon. The lady's eyes hardened, and she started to run around the side of the building. The cigarette man beside her also took up pursuit of the boy. Both of their eyes hardened with hatred for the demon thief. Nakata shot down the street, just finishing stuffing the second roll down his throat. He looked over his shoulder to see the shop owner in hot pursuit, yelling at nearby villagers to help him catch the demon. Nakata's eyes widened when he noticed the lady in the gray raincoat jumping across the rooftops. The cigarette man following just behind her. "It's Shinobi," Nakata thought in terror. He started to get even more scared when the lady started going through hand seals. Martial arts films. Nakata tried to pour out more speed, but he was already so tired. Suddenly his world went black, and he crashed to the pavement. He struggled to open his eyes but was unable to tell if his eyes were open or closed. Everything was so dark. Suddenly he was bound to a tree in the middle of the street. The woman and man shinobi were standing in front of him while the shop owner and several villagers were running toward him. "No, let me go, please," Nakata shouted at them, trying his best to break out but to no avail. The red-eyed woman gained a dangerous glint in her eye. Pulling out a kunai, she stabbed Nakata in the shoulder. Nakata screamed as she twisted it and kicked him hard in the stomach. The tree he had been tied to disappeared, and he crashed into a wall, slumping to the ground a second later. "Let's go, Asuma. Let the villagers give the demon what he deserves," the woman said with repugnance. Asuma smirked, removing the cigarette from his mouth and tossing it aside. "Just a sec, I want a turn," Asuma replied, an evil grin on his face. He pulled 2 trench knives out of his pouch and slipped them onto his hands. Nakata looked at him in terror and tried to scramble away. The red-eyed lady pulled a kunai from her pouch and threw it at Nakata. The kunai suddenly stopped in midair, running into several pieces of floating paper. Nakata watched with wide eyes as something formed out of paper in front of him. It had a paper flower in its purple hair. Nakata could only see the back of it, but could tell it was a human-like body wearing a black cloak with red clouds. "How dare you?" It was a woman, and she was furious. Asuma and the red-eyed lady narrowed their eyes, backing up and slipping into ready stances. All of the onlookers were crushed under the purple-haired woman's killing intent, turning and running over each other in their hurry to escape. There was no more accurate saying in the shinobi world than, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Nakata watched in amazement as hundreds of paper shuriken formed all around the lady, spinning at high speeds. They were all about to fly forward when the red-eyed lady and Asuma collapsed to the ground on their faces with a thud. Nakata peeked around the purple-haired lady. Behind his 2 attackers stood 2 more people wearing similar cloaks to his saviors. One had spiky orange hair and a look of pure rage for the people collapsed in front of him. Nakata's eyes widened as he took in the third person. He had red hair and violet eyes just like him. "Maybe we are related," Nakata thought hopefully. Wincing from the pain in his chest, he fought the urge to make any noise as he began to feel lightheaded. The purple-haired lady turned around and looked at him. "Hello Nakata-kun, my name is Conan," she said kindly. Nakata noticed her beautiful amethyst eyes. "Hi," was all Nakata got out before ping out and falling over. Conan lifted him up in her arms as the rain was pouring hard all around them, soaking everyone and everything. "Let's go," Nagato said, his voice iron and barely containing his rage. "Hi, Hokage Tower, Hokage-sama, intruders. We are trying to keep them out, but they are breaking through the defenses." A hawk-masked Anbu reported to his leader. Sarutobi's face was grim. He stood in the middle of his office solemnly, the loud noise of the rain slamming against the windows filling the room. "Order the Anbu to let them in," Sarutobi replied, confusing his subordinate. The Anbu obeyed anyway. It has to be Nagato. I saw his chains outside. Sarutobi's face went ashen as he then realized why Nagato would be angry. Sarutobi. At that moment, the oak doors to his office exploded into thousands of pieces. 4 ethereal purple chains twisted and lashed through the air menacingly as 3 people walked in, each cloaked in a black robe with red clouds. You failed your promise. Nagato roared, his spiked chains flying toward the Hokage. Sarutobi paled. Leaning back, he dodged the first chain before leaping over the next one. Calm down, Nagato. Let's talk about this. Nagato only seemed to become more enraged at this. 2 more chains flew out of his back toward the Hokage, one actually piercing through the Hokage's robe and holding him to the wall of his office. Right then the Anbu decided that, regardless of their Hokage's orders, they were to do their sworn job. 8 Anbu appeared out of the shadows and, with chakra-enhanced swords, sliced through the chains, dissipating the part that wasn't still attached to Nagato. Said redhead scowled as he pulled his chains closer to him, 6 purple chakra chains moving back and forth around him menacingly. Sarutobi stood up from the wall, his quick eye taking in his attackers, his mind processing what Nagato said. It was at that moment he spotted Konan holding Nakata in her arms, glaring at him as she stroked the redhead's hair. Nagato physically calmed himself down with great apparent struggle, his facial features relaxing and his chains receding into his back. Sarutobi wasn't sure if he was scared more of Nagato calm than enraged. Hokage-sama, Nagato started, spitting his name like it was poison. You have failed your promise to Minato-sama. All 3 of them stared daggers of flame at the old man. Sarutobi replied, visibly deflated and with his shoulders hunching over, I know. I am disappointed in you. Kushina Jitsu and Minato-sama are disappointed with you. Nagato said grittedly. Sarutobi visibly cowered, shocking all the present and extremely confused Anbu. Minato. The Yondaime. You will allow me to leave the village with Uzumaki Nakata. We will take him to us with a megakure. Nagato's voice brooked no argument. Sarutobi shakily nodded. While he didn't want to let Nakata go, he recognized that he was on the edge of having a war with a megakure, and since Nagato's ascension to power, the village had grown majorly. A megakure was not yet as big as one of the great villages, but they could still make a significant dent in his village. We will return with him in 5 years, where he will enter the academy and become a genin if he wants to. It will be up to him if he still wishes to be a part of this wretched village. Nagato's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. The Hokage only nodded shakily while standing to his feet, the 8 Anbu still positioned between him and Nagato. You have no more right to Uzumaki Nakata. You have failed your promise, broken your oath and left my cousin to the wolves, Nagato declared, turning and leaving. Konan spat in his direction and followed after the enraged redhead, carrying the Kyubi Jinchuriki in her arms. The last person stabbing in the room was the man with orange hair. These 2 are your shinobi, and were alding an innocent and defenseless child. They used kunai, genjutsu, and ninjutsu against a 6-year-old. I expect them to be punished accordingly. Yahiko's voice carried a threatening undertone. Raising his hands, in a puff of smoke 2 people appeared on the floor in front of him. Sarutobi's eyes widened as he recognized the 2 unconscious people, Kurenai Yuhi, rising genjutsu specialist, and his son, Asuma Sarutobi. Hiruzen sighed and watched as the orange-haired man glared at him as he disappeared in a swirl of water a moment later. What are your orders, Hokage-sama? Take them both to Ibiki, Hiruzen replied heavily, collapsing in his office chair. And the Kyubi Jinchuriki? One of the Anbu asked. Sarutobi's eyes shot up, looking directly at the Anbu. Whatever you do, you are not to impede them leaving in any way. Am I understood? Hi, Hokage-sama, was the chorus of acknowledgements before they all disappeared, leaving the old leader to his thoughts and misery. I failed you, Minato, Kushina. Sarutobi knew he had no one to blame but himself. He had done a lousy job of taking care of Nakata, and it was entirely his fault. I hope you find a better life, Nakata. Sunagaker. That the last of everything you want to bring with you? Naruto asked his friend. Gaara nodded in response, his sand dropping a few of his personal belongings on a scroll in the middle of Naruto's room. Good. Then, Naruto channeled chakra to the scroll and the vast ornament of miscellaneous objects on top of the seal disappeared. Naruto nodded before rolling the scroll up. Now how do I carry this with me? Naruto mused, looking at the rather large scroll. He needed to be able to use his chakra dissolving techniques so he couldn't carry it. Naruto, open up one of the other scrolls you bought, Kaguya ordered. Naruto obeyed quickly, unrolling a scroll of similar size. They had been unsure how much they wanted to bring. Now place your palm on the center of the seal, feel the seal and attempt to bring it into yourself. Naruto nodded, doing so. Gaara and Naruto watched in amazement as the ink and kanji flowed off the paper and up his arm before forming into an intricate pattern. The kanji for seal settled in the middle of his palm. A moment later all the ink faded away. Naruto inspected his arm while Gaara just watched, very interested in this new development. What just happened? Naruto asked. You absorbed the chakra and ink of the seal. Your body, being chakra itself, learned how to use this seal. You can now seal things into yourself, Kaguya explained. Naruto's eyes went wide. Moving to the large rolled-up scroll he placed his palm on it before channeling chakra to his palm. The next moment the parchment disappeared into his palm and was gone. Gaara's eyes grew considerably. How did you do that, Ni-san? He inquired curiously. Naruto shook his head. Apparently my new bloodline allows my body to adapt to and absorb seals. Interesting, Naruto replied, getting a surprised look from Gaara. Are you ready, Gaara? Hi. Tonight then. That night, Gaara and Naruto moved carefully across the village rooftops, keeping as quiet as they could and out of sight. Their destination was the entrance gate to the Sand Village. Gaara had agreed with Naruto's idea after thinking about it for a while. Besides Naruto, Temari and Kankuro, he had nothing tying him to the village. After getting Gaara's agreement with the plan, Naruto discreetly told Temari and Kankuro what they were going to do, not wanting to leave them in the dark. Gaara was concerned about his father's spies, so Naruto used his mind link with Temari and Kankuro to explain it to them. Both of them wished them luck in their travels, not wanting them to go. But they both decided to stay in the village. Temari and her brother agreed that if Naruto did end up creating the place he wanted to, that they would come there. Neither were staying because of any loyalty to Suna, their father. That had died when they learned off all the I Nation attempts against Gaara and Naruto by their father and many villagers. Temari and Kankuro did have friends in the Suna village though, and they didn't want to just up and leave them. Naruto and Gaara launched across another space, pausing when a voice rang out. Hey, you there, stop. Identify yourself and your reason for being here. Naruto turned, activating his dojutsu for the first time that night, cursing himself for forgetting he had such an advantage. Naruto said, as he saw the shinobi. His non-human characteristics began lighting up in the moonlight. Gaara turned slightly, one green eye staring at the two shinobi who had obstructed them. Why, you're the Shiroi Oni, the man stammered in terror, now recognizing just who he had stopped. Promptly fearing for his life, he hastily backed up past his partner who apparently wasn't afraid of either of the two demons. What are you doing here? You're not allowed out this late at night. Go back to your cage. The Sand Chunin sneered at them, pulling out a kunai and stalking closer to the demonic duo. Naruto raised a clipped eyebrow. That's okay. We were just leaving, Naruto replied, beginning to walk toward the entrance to the village. Gaara followed after him calmly. Where are you going? You must return to the Cage's mansion at once. The brave, or possibly stupid, Chunin yelled at their backs, getting an incredulous look from his partner. Let me leave with my brother in peace, I don't want to have to kill you, Naruto said smoothly, still staring forward, though he could see the two Chunin-level ninja behind him clearly. Both the hated demons are leaving your village, is that not enough? He asked. The one sensible Chunin was severely frightened by Naruto's smooth and almost regal tone. Ha, right. I'm taking you both back to the cage. If you don't come peacefully, I'll kill you. The Chunin's face betrayed his rage as he leapt forward. He had a personal vendetta against Naruto. A few years earlier, Naruto had killed his father when he attempted to innate Naruto in a back alleyway. Naruto smirked. Guess I'll be trying that new technique sooner than I thought. Stretching out his hand, he felt himself connect to the rushing Chunin's chakra supply. Gaara watched in interest as Naruto squeezed his hand slightly and the Chunin crumpled to the ground in pain. Do you still wish to fight us? Naruto asked, raising a clipped eyebrow as the Chunin struggled to his feet. The angry, vengeful Chunin started to hastily go through hand seals. No, Gokido, don't, shouted the other Chunin in horror from the nearby roof. Naruto's pale pupil-less eyes narrowed, and before the Chunin finished his last seal, Naruto crushed his hand together and pulled. Gokido let out an ear-piercing scream and collapsed to the ground on his face. Naruto felt rejuvenated as he pulled the man's chakra into himself. He turned to where the other Chunin had been, only to see him quickly running away. Naruto shrugged, turning toward the gate. Gaara, it seems our secret got out. There are around 30 shinobi guarding the gate. Gaara only shrugged back. Launching off at the same time, they moved across the roofs quickly, abandoning stealth entirely for speed. Arriving near the gate, they found there were indeed a large number of Suna shinobi guarding the entrance. With his Byakugan, Naruto gazed over the ninja, Gaara standing next to him with his arms crossed. Chunin, Junin and Anbu, Naruto thought. Do you want to deal with them or should I? Gaara asked emotionlessly, though his semi-bloodshot eyes gave away his desire to annihilate. Naruto smirked, how about us both? Gaara showed no visible reaction but dropped to the street below. Naruto followed after, his white robes fluttering in the air as he fell. This is your one chance to move out of our way, Naruto warned, glaring at them all. Something moved in the corner of his vision. Gaara, your father is coming. Let's make this quick. Gaara's grin grew mildly, throwing himself forward as sand poured violently out of his gourd and from the ground around him. Naruto dissolved into a double helix of black and white chakra and flew toward the shinobi on the left. One of the Anbu dodged his quick attack, but the Chunin behind him was not so fortunate. When Naruto's helix form hit the Chunin, it drilled into him, creating a large hole in his chest before ping through and taking a shocked Junin by surprise. Gaara was also wreaking havoc, having plenty of experience fighting Chunin to Anbu-level ninja that had been sent to innate him over his lifespan. He swirled his sand through the air, creating a sizable hammer-like shape. He swung it around before batting several ninjas out of the way and into a wall. Sand shuriken, Gaara cried, causing sand to form into tens of shuriken round him. The next moment they all flew forward rapidly, nailing the slower Chunin while the rest dodged. Gaara growled. He needed to kill them all quickly before his father arrived. Neither he nor Naruto was strong enough yet to take on the cage. While Naruto's ability to steal a person's chakra was effectual, he had to be more powerful than his opponents to wrestle their chakra away from them. Gaara smiled insanely as he crushed two Junin to smithereens in a dual sand burial. Okina Bakahatsu. Great explosion, Gaara heard from his left. Turning, he watched as Naruto threw his hands toward his remaining ninja. A second later, a MIV explosion racked the area, the blast of black and white chakra appearing right in the middle of the group, sending them flying, some in pieces. Gaara watched in amazement. His attention was drawn back to his opponents when his sand shot up and blocked a wind blade attack aimed at his neck. Growling demonically, Gaara sent his sand flying forward in an attempt to capture the last few remaining Anbu. Two moved out of the way to the sides while the third shot up into the sky. That proved to be a mistake as Naruto's helix form pierced into the Anbu's back, forcing him into the ground and drilling a hole through his chest a moment later. Gaara turned his attention to one of the Anbu who was firing a continuous barrage of wind blades at him. His sand swirled around him, protecting him from the sharp air. Naruto was currently still in his helix form. Drilling through the ground, he came out from under the second Anbu a moment later, taking him by surprise. But the Anbu dodged out of the way before Naruto rammed into him. Naruto formed back into his natural body in midair. Using the momentum, he threw several shurikens at the Anbu who blocked with his kunai. Naruto scowled. The cage was already here, watching from the nearby rooftops. If we are going to fight the cage, then we can't have any distractions, Naruto thought. Calling on the plants, he rapped and quickly crushed the pesky Anbu. Ignoring the screams of pain and blood all around him, he leapt quickly to Gaara's side as he was burying the last Anbu in the sand. He's here, Naruto said. Gaara nodded and called all of his sand back to him. Naruto watched intently with his Byakugan as gold dust began to flow from the cage, surrounding the area that they were in with a light layer of floating reflective gold. His eyes narrowed as the cage dropped to the ground in front of them. It seems that my two most powerful weapons are trying to escape, the cage said as he came closer, his gold swirling around him in a way similar to Gaara's sand. Your weapons? I think you misunderstood Kage-sama, Naruto replied, his voice monotone. Oh, what do I not understand? Naruto and Gaara shifted into combat stances. We were never your weapons, they said together before rushing the cage. Gaara's sand flew toward his father, though it was blocked by a wall of gold dust. Naruto saw an opening and threw his hands toward the Suna leader. Thick, nasty-looking vines proliferated out of the ground toward the cage. Yet he looked unfazed. Futon. Hoku no Kage-Q, wind sphere of the hawk. Sharp wind blades spun into existence around the cage, fluttering his cage robes and slicing through the vines that attempted to reach him. Naruto scowled at his plants being cut up. While a normal wind attack wouldn't hurt the plants, Naruto could see the MIV amount of chakra within the jutsu. Both he and Gaara backed up, the redhead retracting his sand. It was at that moment the cage decided to attack. Jitten. Richisupaiku, magnet release, rich spikes. Naruto's eyes widened as he watched the cage's chakra pour into the soil under them. Faster than Naruto could react, the gold dust spikes shot out of the ground. Naruto watched them coming, opening his mouth to yell at Gaara to move. Naruto's eyes were wide as he watched a spike come directly for him. Fury suddenly saturated the air as a MIV amount of plants burst out of the ground, wrapping around the gold spike coming for Naruto, and lifting him away from the danger. In his mind, Naruto could feel his father's protectiveness, thankful for it. Naruto regained his bearings quickly, and with his vision sharpening, he found Gaara and froze. Gaara's sand had moved to protect Gaara, but it hadn't been anywhere near as fast as Naruto's plants. Straight through Gaara's stomach, there was a sharp spike of gold dust. Gaara hacked up blood, convulsing. Gaara! Naruto cried from his perch in the air, being carried by the plants. The next moment the multiple gold spikes across the ground retreated, the gold returning back to the cage who watched the scene in fascination. Gaara! No! Naruto yelled. Dropping to the ground, he ran over to Gaara's paling form. Blood was pouring out of the large wound in his chest. The sand protecting Gaara moved out of Naruto's path before continuing to whirl around the boys. Gaara tried to talk, but his lungs were missing a rather significant amount of them. Naruto's eyes were wide, fury boiling over in MIV quantities as he felt power, rage, and wrath pouring through him. You! Naruto yelled, whirling toward the cage. Rage and loathing for the man in front of him consumed his entire being. Naruto tried to take a step forward before he collapsed to the ground in pain. Screaming, he moved his hands to his throbbing eyes. Pulling them away, he found vivid, green blood covering his hands. It was the first time he noticed the color of his blood. Within the mindscape, Kaguya watched her baby boy in concern, preparing to defend him in any way that she could. Her husband had protected Naruto from the last attack, and she was going to help too. Kaguya's eyes widened in shock and amazement as she felt Naruto's body pulse with power. He's already unlocked it, at such a young age. It must have been because of Gaara, Kaguya thought. She routed her chakra through her son to relieve his pain as much as she could. In the real world, light green, black, and white chakra swirled violently around Naruto. On the ground nearby, Gaara laid wrapped up in a sand cocoon, Shukaku doing his best to mend his host. The cage watched in astonishment as the white-haired boy stood to his feet, his hair and garments fluttering wildly. Anticipating an attack, he moved his gold closer and in front of him. The cage wasn't mentally prepared for what he saw though. No. No no no. The cage yelled, his eyes widening as he saw Naruto reopen his eyes. Instead of the normal pale pupil-less eyes Naruto ordinarily possessed, his eyes were now red. The cage watched in amazement and shock as three tomo spun furiously around Naruto's now visible pupil. Die! Naruto screamed, extending both his hands forward. The cage moved his gold into a shield and watched as Naruto's eyes changed further, the tomo molding into swirled lines originating from his pupils. From the swirl were attached small leaf-like shapes. Amaterasu. Naruto's eyes profusely bled light green as black flames instantly shot forth. If the cage had not been prepared for an attack, he'd have been hit by the black flames. Instead, they latched onto his protective shield of metal and immediately began to disintegrate it. The cage quickly performed a kawarimi to get out of Naruto's attack, watching in astonishment from the shadows as his gold was melted into liquid and then dissolved entirely. Naruto collapsed to his knees once more, holding his eyes as they bled through his fingers. He cried in relief as he felt his mother's and father's powers flowing through his body, easing the intense pain he was experiencing. Regaining enough self-control to move over to Gaara's prone body, Naruto shakily placed a hand on Gaara's forehead and connected to his mind. Shukaku, are you there? Naruto asked, his voice unsteady. Yeah, working hard on repairing the Gaki, you need to get out of there and fast. Rasabaka is going to come back, the crazy one-tail answered. Naruto sent him a mental nod before separating. Naruto tried to focus his Byakugan on finding Rasa, but found that it wouldn't activate. Confused, he lurched to his feet and looked around, trying to find the cage. Because of his momentary lack of 360-degree vision, he was blindsided by Rasa's attack. A slam from the gold sent him flying into a building before falling to the ground. The plants were only milliseconds behind the speed of the gold. Gwa! Naruto choked out, wiping the green blood from his mouth. Naruto-kun, let me take control. I'll get you and Gaara out of here, but you'll be unconscious for some time, Kaguya's concerned voice requested. Naruto nodded painstakingly before quickly releasing his control over his body. Kaguya's yokai pulsed through her son faster and repaired his injuries. She looked up and saw the cage walking calmly toward Gaara's prostrate form, the sand rising up to protect the injured and unconscious redhead. Kaguya scowled. Switching quickly into Naruto's helix form, she flew through the air, making the cage dodge out of the way to avoid being hit and backing up. She glanced at him before forming above Gaara, dropping down and picking him up. Looking away from the cage, she raised Naruto's hand, channeling her and the contribution from her husband's energy into Naruto's forehead. The young Rinne Sharingan opened in a pulse of magnificent power and began spinning quickly. Yomatsu Hirasaka, she cried out, and before her, a black rift opened in the air. As it slid open, a black expanse was visible within. Rasa's eyes widened. He slung his gold dust forward in an attempt to stop them from entering what he assumed was a portal. It was too late. Kaguya jumped through the gateway, pulling Gaara and his sand through the portal before it slid shut. The gold dust slamming into where it was just a second later. Damn it! Rasa cursed. I shouldn't have played with them. Lamenting, he turned and stomped toward the tower, his gold filtering out of the ground and back into the pouches on his belt. With Naruto, a black portal slid open above the grey ground, and Naruto fell through in a heap, followed by Gaara and his sand. Naruto groaned, his spinning Rinne Sharingan closing. Flopping over, Naruto looked at the dark night sky and noticed the trees around him. Thank you Ka-san, to-san, Naruto mumbled out before darkness overcame him, he peed out a moment later. Kaguya smiled from within the seal, glad to be able to help her son. They never stood a chance. Even with all of Naruto's powers, he doesn't yet equal the power of a cage, Kaguya thought. She smiled as she felt her husband's natural presence move to Naruto's location in the forest. The trees gained more color, the leaves rustled in the air and the animals chirped happily to feel the presence of the Kaminoki. Kaguya sensed the outside world as she observed vines and plants come out of the ground, forming a dome over Naruto and Gaara's forms. The GR covering the ground became fuller and softer, creating a silky resting place for the two young and battered boys. With the AIM orphans. Where am I? Nakata groaned. Sitting up, he held his head. His senses suddenly came into focus as he smelled food. Opening his eyes slowly, he took in his surroundings. It was dark, but he could see a campfire about a dozen feet from him. He was partly in a sleeping bag, but he could see 3 people sitting cross-legged around the fire, eating a meal. Nakata's eyes narrowed. Unable to make out the people in their dark clothing, he tried to quietly slip out of the sleeping bag and make a run for it. It wouldn't be the first time he had been kidnapped. Nakata, there is no need to fear. He froze and turned to the voice. Seeing the man directly across the fire looking at him, he recognized his red hair and violet eyes, and, for some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity with him. You were there when? Nakata paused, looking unsure for a moment. Oh yeah, Konan-chan protected me from the red-eyed woman, he said slowly as he stitched his memories back together. At his announcement one of the other figures turned, and he could make out her face. Konan-chan, you're here, Nakata said joyfully, running over and sitting next to her. Hello Nakata-kun, she replied, a smile on her face. Nakata smiled back, Konan-chan, thank you for saving me. But where are we? Did you kidnap me? Nakata suddenly looked afraid as he realized that he didn't actually have that much to go on to trust her. Konan frowned before turning to the red-haired man. Getting his cue, he coughed and drew Nakata's attention to him. Hello, Nakata. My name is Nagato Uzumaki, and I am your cousin. Nakata's eyes widened majorly. I've got a cousin. I'm not alone. Nakata nearly screamed in excitement, running around the fire and bowling into Nagato, nearly knocking him over. From the sidelines, the orange-haired man chuckled at his friend's misfortune. He was happy to see Nakata so energetic, though all 3 of them knew it was a mask. Yes, Nakata. I am your cousin on your mother's side. Nagato tried to calm the hyper boy. Setting him down beside him, he got Nakata to quiet down slightly. If you're my cousin Nagato Itoko, where have you been? Nakata asked curiously, his innocent violet eyes staring into Nagato's equally purple ones. Nagato sighed. I have been leading my village. When I left you 6 years ago, you were a baby, and the Hokage promised to look after you. I came yesterday to introduce myself to you. Instead, we found you being chased and beaten, so we stepped in, Nagato explained, getting a nod from Nakata. Wait, you rule a village? Nakata asked excitedly. Nagato nodded. And you are coming with us to live there? The Hokage approved it, Nagato replied. Nakata's eyes widened, and he missed the venomous tone in Nagato's voice. I get to come live with you and Konan-chan and, Nakata trailed off as he looked curiously at the silent, third member of the group. Realizing he was being spoken to, Yahiko grinned and waved. Hello, Nakata. My name is Yahiko. I'm a friend of Nagato and Konan-chan, he stated, getting a happy nod from Nakata. Yeah, and Yahiko ni-san. Nakata exclaimed, turning back to Nagato and entirely missing Yahiko choke on his drink when Nakata called him, ni-san. After he stopped coughing, Yahiko smiled at the young red-headed boy. We are going to train you, Nakata. Then, if you want to go back to Konoha, you can. But that can wait for now, Nagato said, rubbing Nakata's head and getting a small glare from the boy. For the rest of the night, Nakata got to know his new family. He learned that Nagato was a powerful shinobi and the leader of a megakure and that his likes were rain, training, and his friends. Konan was a powerful shinobi as well, and she liked paper, origami, and her friends. She'd also teased Nakata saying she preferred whiskered boys. But, over the course of the night, Nakata hit it off the best with Yahiko. Yahiko loved pranking, water, and ramen. Two of Nakata's favorite things. In fact, Yahiko had some ramen with him, and they ate the food of the gods together. Eventually, though, Nakata's weariness came forth. He laid down on the ground next to the fire and fell asleep. When he is older we will tell him everything about his parents. I don't trust the old fool to fulfill even that, Nagato said, staring at the sleeping form of his cousin. I will protect you now, Nakata. You are my last remaining family, and I won't let any more harm come to you. I agree, Nagato Baka. We will need to figure out if he inherited his parents' Sharingan. He might also have the Uzumaki chains like you do, Yahiko mused, getting a small glare from Nagato for the nickname he had for him. Yahiko pretended not to notice. Konan sighed before speaking. First, we will need to help Nakata out from behind his mask. He has gone through a lot of abuse. He's not really happy, but is pretending to protect himself from being hurt, she said softly, her amethyst eyes gazing fondly upon the red-headed whiskered boy. Both Nagato and Yahiko nodded before falling back into silence. Next day in Konoha. What? Sum yelled. Out of the multitude of people in the room, she was the first to react. Shooting out of her chair and glaring daggers at the Hokage, her fangs and claws elongated. Sarutobi quietly sighed, not offering any defense. He had just told the entire council about Nakata being taken by Nagato and his companions. The response was as he'd imagined. It only took a moment after Sum's reaction for the whole council room to fall into anarchy. Only a few people remained calm. That was not surprising as the Hyuga and Uchiha clan heads rarely showed emotion anyway. Sarutobi declined to answer questions until the room settled down, feeling the headache he had since this morning pounding from the noise. So, let me get this straight. You let 3 unknown ninjas come into this village and walk out with our most powerful weapon, without a fight. Danzo accused, his one visible eye narrowed at the third. They are not unknown. As some of you know, Nakata is the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Sarutobi paused to let this bombshell set in for those that didn't already know. Nagato, the red-haired shinobi, was here the night the Kyuubi attacked. Sarutobi was cut off by Yoshiro, one of the civilian council members. So he was the one that made the Kyuubi attack. He shouted. The entire rest of the council turned and glared at the man, the message very clear, shut up. Sarutobi cleared his throat and explained, Nagato, with his 2 friends, Yahiko and Konan helped Minato to seal the Kyuubi in baby Nakata. The sealing took Minato's life as he used a special type of seal called the Reaper Death Seal. After a pause, Sarutobi continued. If Nakata decides to return to this village in 5 years, and I can't blame him if he doesn't, by then he will know who his parents were. Minato's father, I don't know who he is, apparently trained Nagato and his friends in the Land of Rain. When Minato's father died, the three felt indebted to the man and came to Konoha to introduce themselves to the fourth. They happened to arrive as the Kyuubi was attacking. All in the room listened intently, as no one had known what all had really happened that night. Sarutobi decided that the information about Minato's father and brother, as well as having the Sharingan, didn't need to be shared. Nagato delivered Kushina's and Minato's bodies, along with Nakata, to the Hokage Tower. Minato had left me a scroll, which I read, explaining what had happened and asking me to take care of Nakata. Sarutobi sighed deeply here. I promised to do so, and the next day when I found Nagato staying in a hotel, he made me promise again to look after his cousin. At this, the entire room displayed a variety of shocked expressions. Nagato was very adamant about protecting Nakata, even wanting to take him back with him to Omegakure. I persuaded him to let Nakata stay in his home village, promising to look after the boy. Sarutobi held his head in dismay at this point before continuing. I failed in taking care of Nakata. Entirely failed. I went about introducing him to the village entirely the wrong way. At this point Sume huffed, having stated that exact thing herself years ago. Sarutobi grimaced. Nagato had told me that he would eventually return to Konoha. He would introduce himself to young Nakata as his cousin, train him and try to be a part of his life. Sarutobi paused. They arrived yesterday to find Nakata being beaten mercilessly by many villagers and 2 of my own Junin. Hyuga Hiyashi spoke for the first time since the meeting started. Who were these Junin, if I may, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi sighed. Kurenai Yuhi, and my son Asuma Sarutobi. The reaction in the room was immediate. While the entire civilian council had not cared one bit about the child being beat all those years, they were clearly regretting their attitude in light of the now possible consequences heading their way. The Shinobi Council collectively dropped their jaws, stunned at the 2 who had been named. In the shadows of the room, a purple-haired Anbu wearing a purple Neko mask stumbled in shock and disbelief. All of the Anbu swiftly got control of themselves and shifted back into that emotionless mentality that they were trained for. Nagato came to my office in a rage, the Anbu trying to stop him. Once I realized who it was, I let him in. Sarutobi seemed to physic himself up before continuing. Nagato was mad, and rightfully so. He immediately attacked and accused me of breaking my promise, which I had done. He didn't stop until 8 of my Anbu intervened and positioned themselves between us. At that point, Nagato declared that he was taking Nakata back with him to Omegakure and that in 5 years, if Nakata wanted to return, he would bring him back. Sarutobi's voice trailed off before raising his head, regret clear in his eyes. I had to let them go. Nagato is a cage-level shinobi, and both Yahiko and Konan are S-ranked. A war with Omegakure would not end well for us regardless if we won. Sarutobi paused. Besides, he was right. I had no more right to Nakata. I had failed my promises to Minato. At this, Sarutobi fell silent and stared at the table in front of him. The shinobi and civilian councils processing his words. Danzo didn't let any emotion show on his face, but he was cursing his luck on the inside. If I had gotten to the Kyuubi brat faster, I could have trained him to be a root shinobi. Sume scoffed loudly before slamming her chair back and leaving the council room. That seemed to signify the end of the meeting, so, one by one, all the council members filed out. Uchiha Fugaku stared at the Hokage for some time before getting up and leaving. This only goes to prove that the Hokage is weak. It is time to step up the plans to put the Uchiha in control, he thought to himself. Sume stormed down the halls in a rage, quickly leaving the Hokage tower before heading toward her compound. While externally she was angry, and indeed she was also worrying about Nakata. She and Kushina had been good friends. I wonder if Sarutobi will tell Nakata's godparents, though that moron, Jiraiya, is as much to blame for this as Sarutobi. Nakata's apartment. In the shadows created by the moonlight streaming in through the broken and cracked window, a man with spiky white hair could be made out. Kakashi Hatake stood in the middle of what was Nakata's apartment, if the decrepit and falling apart place could even be called a living space. Kakashi's one visible eye streamed tears down his mask as he looked at the complete dump that Nakata used to live in. Covering the walls were graffiti and scathing profanities directed at Nakata, the demon. The door was barely holding on by a hinge, apparently having been attacked by an axe at some point. But that didn't compare to the inside of the room. Trash was spread evenly across the floor as if someone had pulled it all out and fished through it. It was evident that Nakata had been trying to collect anything of value with which to make some money. Nakata didn't even have something that looked remotely like a bed. Instead, the small indent of his body could be seen upon a pile of trash bags in a corner. It was hard to distinguish the rooms, and what Kakashi suspected was the kitchen was instead a destroyed mess of metal and wood, cabinets obviously ripped out of the walls and broken to bits. Kakashi sobbed, "I'm so sorry, Nakata. Even though I knew you were Minato-sensei's son, I still never came and cared for you. I could have adopted you, I should have, damn what the council would say. I hope one day that you can forgive me." Kakashi fell to his knees and cried, realizing his utter failure to his sensei.